film opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
There we go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Anatomy of a Movie, Hocus Pocus, our Halloween special movie. I'm your host, Marisa Serafini, and with me, I have two amazing co-hosts.
Hi, guys. This is Sara Stretton.
Hello, Sarah. And we have our amazing executive producer and engineering the amazing show, Phil Svitek, in the booth.
Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, Hocus Pocus. It's such a cult classic movie nowadays because it's been out for 20 years already. I mean, that's amazing.
This is the Halloween movie, of my life. I feel like if Dimitri was here, he's always Halloween, Saw, Death and Gore. I'm like, Halloween, sometimes you just need to feel the childhood joy and be happy and dress up. I was the kid who, had fun dress-ups. I wasn't, an axe murderer for Halloween. I was, a princess or a pumpkin.
I agree. I love the kids' movies. I grew up with the friendlier Halloween movies, and then it took me to my teenage years. I finally got into the slasher horror movies that I finally built enough courage to finally watch. But Phil also enjoys this movie too. He's seen it a bunch of times, haven't you?
Phil has. I know he has because he's told me he has. I mean, I don't know what's going on. But I feel like, for me, I will watch this movie every Halloween, whereas with the slasher films, with the horror films, I have to, switch off. I don't watch Halloween every year. I'll watch it every couple of years. Mm-hmm. I'll watch a scary one every couple of years. But this one is, tradition. I watch it. I watch it with my friends. I watch it with my family, everything. And I think that a lot of people, despite the horrible reviews it's gotten by critics, everyone else seems to love it. So, critics can sometimes shut their mouths a little bit.
I agree. Every October, the first or second day of the month, me and my friends would always text each other. It's it's October. That means Halloween. That means Hocus Pocus and Halloween Town and all those kids' Halloween movies that we grew up.
The whole Disney lineup there.
Exactly. So, and you going back to what you just said, that this movie didn't get the best critical reviews when it first came out because it was released in July 16th, 1993, which I thought was interesting why they released it on a summer date, even though it's a Halloween movie in the U.S.
To me, it's when you research this film, I feel like they just had a mixed sense of faith in it. Because originally it was proposed to be a Disney Channel original movie, just air on TV. And then someone said, wait, I think this has the standing legs to go on its own. But then they didn't give it the full push and let it come out at Halloween. They pulled it back to summer. And I think that was because they mentioned that Nightmare Before Christmas also came out in 1993. And that one did come out in October. And looking at a couple of the other movies that came out in 93 were Jurassic Park, Mrs. Doubtfire, The Fugitive. We also got Sandlot in the kids genre, Groundhog's Day, comedy, Robin Hood Men in Tights. So film was kind of all over, but there are a lot of movies that have really stood the test of time from that year. I wish that they had released this in October and really given it the platform that it deserved because people loved it.
I agree. I think had they released it at the proper moment in the proper month, that they would have had the kids demographic as well because kids love to dress up. Halloween is mostly for the kids to have fun at night. And then if they didn't have that as much as well as they could have in October, had they had that because they had it in July, I think they would have got better reviews offhand in the first hand. But over the years, there's been a lot of reruns thanks to ABC Families and a bunch of different networks rerunning it, and it's built a cult following since then.
It's the demand of Halloween movie. I know that right now it gets about $1 million in the month of October every year in DVD sales. So constantly, for 20 years, it's $20 million right there. And I know we talked about the budget think we found it's like $28 million for this film. So just on their DVD sales alone, not including the theater, not including all the TV play it gets, it's almost made up that money.
Exactly, and that much amount of money today is greater than it was back in 1993.
That's true.
And so, but this movie directed by Kenny Ortega, a pretty famous director. He well known for the recent High School Musicals. Newsies he directed that right before this movie, and he also directed a few episodes of Gilmore Girls. So he has that musical kind of fun, witty humor kind of experience in directing, and I liked his style. It was for this movie, for a kids movie. It's a movie that kids can enjoy and adults. It's not complicated that you can't understand the plot points or what's going on. It's a really fun, kept my attention throughout the whole movie, fast-paced direction.
Yeah, I think one of the best things that Kenny Ortega does and the writers do is that you're constantly in this state of disbelief and believing, and they're tricking you at every corner. Throughout this film, it's always you're led to believe like that Thackeray Binks says a cat dies and then he inflates. You're led to believe that Billy is going to attack them, and it's constant. It's every couple of minutes you're getting something wrong or right, whether it's are they really coming back, is how they deal with the devil, all of it. It's constant surprises, and I think that can it just keeps you on your toes.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that goes hand in hand with the writing as well, because it's so witty. They have this great it's so cleverly written how they have like all these references from 1693, the time where the Salem witch trials were heavily going on, and then all these pop culture references from 1993. So the clash of two different worlds, that just makes it all the more funny for us as an audience to watch and understand and laugh at.
What I was telling Phil right before we started is, like, for me, this movie just represents a movie of one-liners. I think Winifred is the most known. Bette Midler, for her crazy lines, just always funny. But all of the characters have them, especially the witches. Do you have a favorite witch?
I would definitely say Winnie, because I love Bette Midler. She's amazing. So I'm a little biased there, but I love Winnie. Because going with Bette Midler and her acting, that all of her one-lines are just so deliberately on the spot. She hits them every time. It makes me laugh every time I watch this movie like I've never seen it before. It's still funny.
Exactly, and you find yourself constantly quoting her. Just like, ooh, kind of like, this is the problem. This is going to be the problem with this Anatomy of movie. I'm sorry if I just start quoting the movie like crazy. I'm really going to try
I'm
not
fine
to.
with quoting it. But there's so many funny lines because... for example, when they're finally they come across the Black River, and Winnie's like, "It's a road." It's so funny.
She is the brilliant. See, my favorite was always Sara, and I think it's because I knew everyone else's favorite was Winnie, and maybe because my name is Sara, so I had some sort of biased predisposition to like her. But I always just found her so curious, and now as I watch it when I'm older, like when I was younger, I liked her because she was the singing one, and because she was always had so much energy, and I wasn't scared of her. I think part of me when I was really little was scared of Winnie, and I thought that Sara kind of just wanted to be nice to everyone. And now when I look back and watch it now, I'm kind of like, okay, Sara is probably the most inappropriate of all of them.
Definitely.
But she growing up was always my favorite. I think you can't go wrong with like Bette Midler, but
let me ask you guys this. Ironically enough, James Cameron kind of brought up this point when Titanic was re-released, right? Years later. We all remember, kind of where we were when we first saw the movie, and then it's interesting to go back years later and how far we've grown, and how, specifically to Titanic, how your ideas about love have changed. And I think credit to the writing. Everyone can identify with something within that, right? And so it's always interesting to go back to that movie, whether it's months, maybe a year, maybe years later, to this movie, and think of where you were when you first saw this movie to where you are now, and kind of your perceptions of the world.
How do you think that's affected you, Phil?
I I don't. Well, I'll speak to that in a moment. But I think the one of the ways it's done is obviously you have Danny, who's kind of a child and innocent, and then you have her brother, who's kind of older, but by still being a virgin, it's kind of representative. Not quite there yet, not quite mature.
Well, this is his coming of age story. Come on.
Oh, totally.
Well, it is.
Because he starts the movie off not believing, from California, recently moved to Salem, and he's having a culture shock too. And so he's in disbelief of this whole Sanderson bitch tale that's going on. So I liked how he grew up in this movie from disbelief to reality.
Of course, and growing into the man who can be willing to sacrifice himself for his sister, and understanding what's really important and that the family and the relationships, and it doesn't really matter where physically you are home, it's just the people you're with. But
he still values Yabos.
Yes, he does. Every
values Allison's Yabos.
But Max has the same parallel storyline with Thackeray and Emily, because Thackeray really cared about his younger sister and tried to protect Emily from the witches, and Max is doing the exact same thing. So there's a lot of similarities between those two guys.
Definitely. I think that Thackeray kind of represents where Max wants to be and where he should be headed and where he does end up. I think that Thackeray almost represents the kind of ideal brother. He's the conscience, he's the guiding force, and as the cat, he is that too. He's the advisory for their missions, for their knowledge, everything. So I think while they do run parallel, I think it's more of a target.
Okay. And also Thackeray, he failed at protecting his sister, so he wants to do his best to guide Max to succeeding kind of for him and for Max. Kind of like Thackeray's redemption.
Yes, definitely.
But Phil, what did you think of Thackeray and Max? Do you
have a team? Do you have a favorite? Are you inside of Thackeray or inside of Max?
In terms of the witches, you're talking about just versus them?
And I want to know what witch you like too.
I actually liked Mary, because she was
rounds out there.
I liked Mary because she's smart, but she's not quite there yet. But she has this innocence to her where she's always trying to help and kind of figure things out, and she doesn't understand the world, most notably with on what do we fly?
A vacuum.
But in terms of Max, or I guess Thackeray, I think Thackeray for me was the one. I liked him more, only because there was such a mystique to him. He's the one we see at the beginning, and so for me, as a young kid growing up, I liked him more. And plus, I just liked playing in the woods, so I related more than that L.A. California tie-dye laid back.
Yeah.
What are you saying? I might like Thackeray too, and I'm from California.
That's what I'm saying, is that you don't like him.
I did not say that. Do not put those words in my mouth.
Okay, so
I like Billy. Billy's my favorite.
Billy was fun. Yes, Billy, but we'll get into Billy a little bit. But let's just get into the cast members. Bette Midler. She's already had an amazing career before Hocus Pocus and all the musical movies that she's done. Sarah Jessica Parker, she was on the rise with her career at this point, and Kathy Najimy. I think these three women were paired up so well. Even though they play sisters, they look nothing alike, they act nothing alike, but they yet all meshed well, so together, so cohesive.
Yeah, I think that's obviously a huge part in the actors, but also in the writing, just how distinct they made their characters, and really they just fully committed to believing in these crazy witches and their absolutely insane point of view. And I really did feel like they embraced thinking that sprinklers were the burning rain of death.
Burning rain death.
They the shock of technology and entering this world. Well, some may say it's overacted or whatnot. I didn't think so. I just felt that they just fully went all the way, as far as they could, into this unattainable thing. I love it. I love them. I will say, though, that the original cast for Mary was offered to, I believe, Rosie O'Donnell. And so when I found that out, I tried to picture her in this whole time. But I love, instead, the innocence that we get and that more of goofy innocence that we instead got in this movie. And I don't think Rosie could have captured that as well.
Yeah, and I love how Kathy Najimy, her character kind of acts like a dog. So she has an animalistic side to her as well as a soft, caring side for always caring about Winnie and Sarah and what's going on. I feel like
all the way down that she can smell everything.
Exactly.
Just like it.
Mary tries her best to help everyone else, even though she might not have everything. The lights are not all on upstairs.
Well, to the point of obviously the witches, but also everyone kind of in the cast, they all fit into this weird stereotype, right?
Exactly.
And cliches are easy to write because they work. That's what a cliche is. However, they do it in such a way, and it's a combination of obviously the writing, directing, acting, and also say editing, where it doesn't come off cliche, and yet through that combination of each of those things, each character is so distinct, and right off the bat. I mean, again, within the first few minutes, with the whole backstory of the Sanderson sisters, each one's personality, each one's power, and things like that. And so it sets you up for moving forward, so that way, when you are kind of, especially in that scene, waiting for the black flame candle to be lit, you don't quite know what you're going to get, but it's not going to be good because of what you've already seen and, just a hint of that power.
I mean, I think what we see is that the main characters are very straightforward with who they are, and their personalities are very, as you said, like kind of cliche, kind of stereotypical. But then in order to counteract that, what the script does is constantly, as I said before, add little twists, add little surprises that you don't expect. Specifically when like Zachary Banks inflates or any of those little things, that's how they keep it from being too obvious all the way through. And they very strategically plan that, like every couple of minutes there's a new little twist or turn. It's not constantly forward motion, it's always adding these little surprise elements.
And the surprise supernatural elements, and also the realistic elements of just being a human being, because we see Max getting kind of bullied in high school, all these real problems that kids go through nowadays. So there was a nice balance of the supernatural aspects that are unbelievable, but then the real life, and that makes the movie all more real and more relatable to everyone.
Well, you need that in film. Like, you need some sort of realism, or else there's nothing to tie it down. There's nothing for you to personally relate to because you can't imagine it. And they do that with the relationship with Allie and with Danny, and even the sisters' relationships amongst themselves.
Yeah, and I feel with the three sisters, you have the one strong one who is the leader, the one slightly ditzy one, and then the one who just tries to help everybody. And that's what we get with Winifred, Sarah, and Mary.
So I think that they balance all the characters well. I think that how they set up, how we get the rise and fall, how we get the fake satisfaction in the middle where they think that they've defeated the witches in the burner, and then it plummets right back down again to them being in this naive position just like they were in the beginning. All of that's framed very well. I want to talk a little bit about the planning of the scenes, the plot, how it's driven, and also more of the technical aspects, lighting, sound, whatnot. If you don't mind, do you want to start with sound?
Yeah, the sound. There was great supernatural, the candle being lit and all the lights going out and the sound effects, the attitudes, like it gave that scary moment of like, oh no, something's happening, evil's gonna come back. So I thought that was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I always have to think about this in the fact that this was filmed in 1993, and for the sound effects, they were on target. They were the things, but I also liked, for soundtrack wise and for everything, the aspect of music that was intertwined into this film. And I think that it comes from the fact that Kenny Ortega did do Newsies. It has now done High School Musical and This Is It. He has such a connection to full music, and this movie lends itself to almost being a musical. And I know there's a grassroots movement out there right now for there to be an official Broadway musical. I know that they've mentioned trying to get Bette Midler on board to produce. If not, I would like her to be in it.
That'd
if
be
they
amazing.
make it. I mean, she's still alive. Sarah Jessica's still here.
They're all still alive.
But just make the full musical. It'd be great. But because we've already got, 3 or 4 songs that are actually sung and intertwined into this. And I think they do it in a way that it doesn't pull me out. It seems realistic. It seems to flow with the plot. It doesn't seem like, oh, it's a musical number here. It just works.
And the way that they sang it, it wasn't distracting. It was for a purpose. Mm-hmm. The first song, the first major song with Bette Midler singing, I'll Put a Spell on You.
After the Skeleton Man's version of it.
Yeah, and there was a quick moment where they shot to Winnie, and her face was just like, oh, I could sing this song so much better. I'm like, please, Bette Midler, just do your thing. Go up on stage and just show him how it's really done. And she goes, and she sings it. It's fun, and I love how Sarah and Mary just go in back, just like backup singers.
Well, it's captivating, but it's not too much. I just feel like this whole performance, like sometimes when you see someone sing in the middle of a film, you're like, okay, this could be shortened to about 20 seconds. Like, I like that they show from the beginning of that song, from her big entrance all the way through where she's like basically taking the round of applause and exiting. Like, you get that full performance and that full lore in it, and the fact how they tie the Skeleton Man song into still that spell-like lyrics that we get in the back, and we get them even chanting back and forth, which is kind of a reflection on the beginning when we get them singing to the townsfolk on the news
right before
their first performance that no one will listen to. So I just like that they maintain the spells with the music and intertwine those elements. And it was just entertaining, especially as a kid. You love to be able to sing those songs and chant them back.
I still love to sing them now. And every time I hear I Put a Spell on You, I just think of Bette Midler and Hocus Pocus. I don't think of any other version. Because it's a famous song, written by Jay Hawkins.
Nah, no other version exists. Just Bette Midler's version.
No other ones. And that was so cleverly and well done. It wasn't distracting. It was entertaining. I think if you're a kid, when you're younger, you might get a little bored or lose interest, but then when you throw a musical, that just gets the kids back engaged again.
Exactly. And then we also have the other famous one is Sarah's song, that her luring ability, her one thing that she kind of contributes to the group is that she can sing this song to get children to come.
It's like a siren song.
A siren song for children, and it makes sense because she is the siren of the sisters. That's her whole thing, is she wants to be able to lure like boys and everything to her, and that's what's gotten her in trouble with Billy. She dances devil. It goes straight through. So the fact that it would be a siren song fits perfectly. I used to sing this song as a kid. Like, that was the one I would sing after this, and I would think it sounded so happy and which I guess is the point. It's supposed to sound alluring and happy. And
I wouldn't say happy. I'd say creepy and mysterious a little bit. There's some creepy elements to it, and
I don't find it creepy at all. I feel like
I think soothing. That's the whole point.
Or like a lullaby, kind of, right?
Lullaby, yeah, exactly. Again,
Are you soothed by this song? Is that what you're saying? Are you allured to Sarah?
Okay, but think of the pitch. Think of how think of the tempo, all those different things. It's very calming. It's not unlike I Put a Spell on You. It's slow. There's not a lot of instruments in it, and so yeah, it's just kind of mainly her voice and bring you to it. Well,
that is true. It's especially focused on her voice, but also the soundtrack of that song plays in multiple times throughout the movie, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and the music for that particular Sarah's theme, the music was by James Horner, who's well known for Titanic and a bunch of films. And the interesting thing is that I Put a Spell on You was for adults, and then Sarah's theme is for children. So they're drastically different. And then, yeah, that was all for songs, right?
Music.
Yeah, songs, music. I did like the kind of chant that the three sisters did near the beginning of the movie when they're enchanting Thackeray.
Or trying.
turning him into a cat.
Oh, that part.
Twist the bones and bend the back.
Nothing.
That would, like, every chant that they do is in a sing-songy voice, which is actually pretty fun to listen to as a kid.
Definitely. It's entertaining. It's entertainment. This movie is just, it makes me happy. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, and so let's talk about a little bit of the practical effects in this movie. Going back to Binks.
To that point, what's interesting to me, this is the first movie we've kind of reviewed that hasn't had computer technology because it wasn't really in full effect. And also, this is, I'll talk about this more in editing, but, everything was done practically from, what we see shot on camera to how it was literally edited. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of that, I think because, could this be done a little bit better, let's say, with today's technology? Yes. But because of the effort put into it and the fact that it is somehow grounded in reality, we buy it so much more. And I think that's why we ultimately end up loving it.
I mean,
absolutely.
I agree. You can look at this and pick and point and be like, why? You can tell that the floors are being moved because of machine. But I loved it. And as a kid, I fully believed it and was scared about how they would shake the ground and how they put in the effort to move the land around the graves, or they made the witches fly with wires instead of like having a green screen CGI. They created these sets and had them pulled up. I think that they did a really good job, and you can tell that they all cared about the project.
Absolutely, and because the effects are so simple in this movie, it still allowed the children and the audience in general to use their imagination. Because I feel like with technology nowadays, that's kind of ruining that. We can't think for ourselves of how it should look or how we should appreciate it. But I think because it was so simple that we as kids, we forget that they're just on harnesses flying around.
Exactly. And as a kid, I was wowed. I was wowed by how they did extinguish all the light bulbs in the beginning and then reignite all the flames, and how they did them in sequence. It wasn't all in one, but it was just pop, 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 pop in a row, and then you see the fire light up. All of that, it took me into that world. I wasn't thinking, oh, that's fake. And I still think they did a good job, especially for, when was this, 1993?
93. I'm sure, and they filmed it in 92. But that just goes to show the difference of kids' movies back then to kids' movies now. I want to see another kids' Halloween movie nowadays.
I feel like
they released it in the future.
The ones that I most compare to this for Halloween, it's like I have a few favorite Halloween movies. This would be probably the top of my list. I love A Nightmare Before Christmas, but I normally watch that around Christmas or probably around Thanksgiving. I don't really group that in my Halloween movies. But also like Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin, but that's animated. If you go to real life, maybe Halloween Town, another Disney movie.
Yes.
I'm trying to think, but what else fits in this genre of kids Halloween that's really lasted time? Maybe Beetlejuice-ish?
Beetlejuice, and then Don't Look Under the Bed. All the Goosebump movies.
Coraline's a fun, newer one. That I would lump that in. But for me, in terms of this movie, sometimes one of the things that you can see on screen, again, we were talking about it with the Three Sisters, but I think everyone involved in the production, there just seems like a passion to have wanted to make this project, where sometimes there's movies that are produced today, and you're like, okay, I get why, let's say, a studio would want to make that movie, but it didn't seem like anybody else really cared and didn't put in that passion. And I think everyone did go for this movie and want to make this movie, and so you see that's essentially what I think people are holding on to and why it works so well, is because people did care.
I agree, and you can tell in the acting that they were all there because they wanted to be, because they
were having so much like fun.
Exactly, the actress knows that whatever the movie is, the story, the writing, it is ridiculous. It's ridiculous to watch and listen to, and being an adult from an outside perspective, to be like, what is this? This is just crazy. But actresses knowing the kind of craziness they're getting into and really just want to put their all in. And Bette Midler even said in an interview, this was like the most fun she's had on any project up until the Hocus Pocus movie.
And that's fantastic, especially from coming from such a successful person. They've had but involved in so many things. And at that point, she'd been on Broadway, she'd been in film. And I think all of those really, her past experience really lended her to this role in that big persona. Because to me, it was like she was basically on stage. It was that big voice, that big presence. Sometimes they say that, you know, film is made in the close-up, and she does have great close-ups, like her death stare, her teeth, all those things. But also her wide and her medium shots are great because she just has this presence where she's just taking over the room. She's standing so tall, and there's so much of their personality is not only captured in their face and in their lines, but in their movement. The fact that, you know, Sarah's always like jumping around, and I feel like her arms at certain point are like attached to her body. They're just like,
well, you bring up an interesting point in terms of how it's shot. I mean, you know, and that she has a theatrical background, right? It does seem very theatrical in the sense that a lot of the stuff that we do watch is in typically wides, maybe a medium, and very specifically do go to a close-up. I think of remember the first time Max hears Thackeray speak as in cat form.
mm-hmm.
They go to that close-up of his face with just the eyes in wide shock. So they use it very strategically for a comedic effect. But I think using the wides and is a byproduct of A, there's a lot of physical humor, but
yes.
B, by doing that, we're just seeing kind of life lived. And also, we want to see the reaction of each of those characters at that moment happening. And a lot of it is, for example, especially with the sisters, right? Because as we talked about the one-liners and the comedy, if you chopped it up where you go from Winnie to Mary to Sarah, whatever, it would feel like you're manipulating the performance to be funny, whereas by seeing them in one continuous shot, they are funny, and so therefore it is that much funnier.
Exactly. And to your point, it's because when you see them in the wide shot, because they have these different personalities, you can get the reaction shot, and the fact that all of them have such different but such specific reactions, that's the humor. That's the funny. It's because you're like, you see their personalities through one look, and watching them all together does make it better versus having them all separate.
Exactly. And when they're together, when the three girls are always walking together, they have this motion that they go back and forth, side to side when they're walking, and it's so funny. They do it throughout the whole movie, so it just shows that even though they're so different, they're still in sync.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the performance by all of them are amazing, and even the young actors in this movie too. Thora Birch, she was a kid in this movie, so little, but she has the driving plot. Pretty much, she's the driving force because she convinces Max to go to the broken down museum or the closed down museum, and
she kind of objects to it. She
gets him there and starts the whole
Allison's
story.
yabos convince him.
Yes.
Okay.
And then even Allison, we gotta have that love interest for Max as well, because I liked how they had two younger adults, one who believed in the story and knew all about it, which was Allison, and then Max, who didn't know anything and didn't believe about it. So I liked how they had the two viewpoints kind of clash there and bring them together.
I agree, and that works so well. And then you have Danny kind of caught in the middle, where she's just feels like lost and confused, but then she's the first to kind of really commit into this new world. Like, she is the one who comes up with the idea to pop up and pretend to be a witch, and she's very smart, and she is accepting of like Thackeray, like, and maybe that's because she is like the kid in the show, that she can just like access this world like more easy than Max, who has to kind of come to terms and like, deal with it. He deals with it on a slower pace instead of jumping in.
And even as a kid, she was so precocious, and she was even telling off Winifred, "You're ugly, and you know it." And so she had a lot of great moments on her own, and she's just a kid.
Or when she's like talking to the bullies, when she's talking to Ice, and she's like, "You're a moron. My brother's gonna come."
For your information, he's a little eager.
Oh my God.
Yes, and of course Allison, she was great too. Just that nice female force to help in this whole situation. That that sidekick.
Yes, but she's the underlying motivation that this all happened, because he did it just to impress her.
Yeah. So, Phil, what did you think of the younger adults in this movie, the teenagers, so to speak.
Are you talking about Ice? What did I think of Ice?
Ice.
Do you like
yes.
Ice? Do you identify with Ice?
Tubular.
I didn't identify with Ice, but it was, every character is in there by design, and the fact they're so funny and they're just so over the top. And again, it creates, what's nice about it is that throughout the whole movie, it also creates it's a barometer for big and small victories, right? So when he finally, Max gets his shoes back, you're really rooting for them. And again, it just helps with that whole, we've kind of, right, it's after the book has been opened, Danny's been kind of stolen, so we rescue her, so everything's on a euphoria. So I've stolen his shoes, and yay, let's root for the good guys. But we also know that, hey, they're going to obviously figure this out. This is by this point the third time we've tricked the witches. They're going to realize it's not daylight savings time.
Yeah.
So, but again, just the fact that everything ties to each other is great. And again, you have all these different characters to kind of root for, or not, I don't know necessarily root for, but to make fun of.
Yeah, and also just because we're talking a little bit about Ice, one of my favorite things about this film is about film in general, is when people can take a prop or a little something and tie it in throughout the film, but also make it make sense. So just like the shoes, the Nike Free Runners, the fact that in the very beginning those illustrate that he doesn't fit in, that he's being picked on, and then that his parents don't even understand because they're just like, oh, why doesn't he have shoes? Oh, it's a fad. And then that crosses over to them still smelling like Max, so the witch is finding them, and then that's what gets them trapped, and then to him reclaiming those shoes when he's kind of bested them. The fact that can tie through in so many different ways and lend to comedy and lend to setting and lend to plot, that's a really good use of a prop and something coming full circle and being planned out. And so I like it when people can do that and keep that in mind, because that's such a little thing when you're thinking about, oh, how am I going to make this witch fly? How am I going to make all of this other stuff happen, that you can just also focus on the little things.
And absolutely, and that also goes hand in hand with the book, my book, because that has all of Winifred's spells and potions recipes that she's pretty much powerless without it. And we have it in the beginning of the book, turns Thackeray into a cat, so that just shows so much power throughout. And then once she loses that, that's another driving force why she's after the kids and after the book, in order to lure all the children and stay young forever. But and that book just ties out throughout the whole movie, and that also helps with when she finally thinks that she lost it, and Max and Allison have the book open. That's just another driving force to get back to the book.
Yep.
So that goes throughout the whole movie too.
But what I also, in terms of the book specifically, but there's also other objects. The fact that people do put such an emphasis on that because they're not trusting themselves, right? For example, Winnie and the rest of them, they were saying like, hey, let's make the potion by memory. And they had it until Winnie gave up on herself, right? Or they just certainly didn't. Well, they didn't want to listen to Sarah because, she was like, I remember it was like yesterday.
You were in the back dancing idiotically.
Exactly. And they could have pieced it together. But again, Winnie, to some extent, had too much pride because she didn't want to listen to Sarah or whatever.
And also she has a very, I think that the reason they chose to make the book actually have life in that it has an eye that opens and seems to have a mind of its own is because the power that it has over Winifred. She loves that book. She loves that book as much as she loves her well, if she even loves her sister, no, who knows. But I feel like she cares about the book way more than she cared about Billy, way more than she cares about anything. So the choice to show that relationship in giving the book actual life is a fun thing. They didn't have to do that. It could have just been a book, but to add those things giving it an eye, giving it this power to create light and to be able to flip its own pages when she asks questions, for the book to be wanting to get back to its master. It's
okay. Do you think derivative?
Lord of the Rings, right?
Okay, I was just gonna ask that derivative of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's the book has a mind of its own. The book
wants to get back
to be
to
with
this
Winnie.
master. Yeah,
it wants to be used for spells. It wants this power.
And the thing about the book is that we only see maybe 3 different pages of the book, but it's a huge book. I don't know, I just wanted to see what else was in that book too. It reminded me of
The Bound of Skin book.
Yes, it reminded me, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Charmed, but the Book of Shadows.
Oh, yeah.
That's a very important object that they're kind of helpless without it too.
Yeah.
But and in that book, in that show, can ward off evil, knows its master, and can open books and flip to certain pages on its own too. So,
Master.
Yes, master. So
That's my transition into master.
Master.
Master?
Satan.
Yes,
Master Satan.
Oh, is that what you're saying?
Of course. Yes, great
Master
cameos
Medusa?
by Gary Marshall as the devil and Penny Marshall, who's well known for being Laverne in Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah.
That was just a nice nod to the adults who were watching.
True. And maybe that's why, as a child, I really didn't like this scene. This scene has, like, grown on me. Like, if I had done this show, Anatomy of a Movie, when I was, like, 5, I'd have been like, why aren't they singing the whole time? The witches are scary. But now, and I would have been like, I don't understand why the devil's in there. Now, looking back, being older, seeing the worrisome of the wife over him dancing with Sara, all of that makes so much more sense. Watching the baby and the dog and the clicker and her pointing then the clicker at the wife, all of that clicks so much more.
It's so funny because they probably never seen a remote before, so they're just clicking and pointing at anything.
And thinking it has all this power.
Exactly. And I loved how they showed a more positive side of the evilness because devil, Satan, that's someone you shouldn't be revering. And also there was a line where Winifred was like, oh, I've been to hell. It was quite lovely. Thank you. So they're showing, I don't know, a more positive aspect of hell and those themes.
It's all their perspective. It's the fact that the same reason that they find beauty in a dead man's, toes. They're like excited about it. It's not gross. It's wonderful.
Yes, things to be embraced.
It's like she wants to spit in the potion. This isn't a bad thing. Like if someone spits in your cup,
Another
it's a
glorious
compliment.
morning. It makes me sick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just a change in perspective, and that does carry through the whole time. That's fun.
Yes.
Although they all seem to care about love on some aspect. Love still, like, while daylight might be like the anti-happiness, love still seems to be a goal. They want the love of Satan. Sarah wants the love of boys or whatnot.
Billy.
And they flirt with their bus driver.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And going back to Billy, he gets conjured from the dead by Winnie, even though Winnie was the reason why he was in the ground in the first place. And then I love
Sarah was more of the reason he was in the ground in the first place. And I do...
typical sibling problems.
But don't worry, when he's resurrected, they still have their little chemistry moment. She still waves to him.
Yes, and
no lessons learned.
The thing about this zombie was that I was actually afraid of the zombie when I was a kid. He was scary. He's chasing around and having his head cut off. That's scary to watch. But then we find out he's such a nice guy. He's actually against the sisters.
So another one of our twists.
Another ally.
Let me ask you guys this in terms of you guys say love, but for me, I think it's maturity. And in some ways, it doesn't really paint adults in a great picture because, all right, Danny says to Winifred, you've already sold your soul. It doesn't matter how young or old you are. And in some ways, the kids and innocence are revered, whereas that's where everyone's trying to get to ultimately. And so, in terms of that, I never came to a conclusion as to what it's saying about adult responsibility versus non-responsibility because obviously Thackeray and Max, they both have to kind of be responsible, protect their sisters, and through that they become men, so to speak. But I don't know. For me, that's the only one thing unclear that I'm still trying to ponder over.
I mean, I think that it's obvious that the witches seek youth because they think it's like the best thing that they can get out of life. However, I think that we do see a good adult in Billy, and maybe that's because he's found it in death. Maybe it's because he's already learned his lesson. Who knows? But he is a kind soul. He is putting himself out there, even though I mean, I guess he doesn't have much to lose since he's already been dead. But it's him and, for me, Thackeray that are really the guiding forces in this, and like kind of the best forces. We see Max grow, we see Allison be able to deal, and we see Danny, she's just such a sweetheart because she is a child and does have innocence, but she's a spunky child who's willing to fight, and she's not passive. Like Emily in the beginning, who's kind of her parallel, is more of passive. She's not really fighting back. She's sitting very angelically as this potion's taking her. Danny is fighting. Danny is willing to spit in someone's eye. She's willing to go and try and help Billy. Like, she does have a childhood innocence, but she's a fighter. So I guess my point is that I don't think she's a complete innocent in this picture, and that Billy is a good adult versus all the other adults who are too naive to, or too unwilling to believe, to listen, like at the party to their kids when Winifred's introduced or anything like that.
Yeah, and the things, because they still have that innocence, they still have that belief, and adults don't, which the thing I found interesting is because this is a Disney movie, Max and Danny, they still had both parents.
They have both parents. It's crazy.
But yet they weren't like any factor in this movie, which was still kind of disappointing, because even though they had both parents, which most Disney stories don't, that they still weren't a pivotal character in their growth as people.
They were the dad was very worried that Max got the girl pregnant. So, just saying that he was worried.
And I think that they're pivotal in the fact that their absence makes Max grow up on his own. Like, they go the normal route, which is go find adults, go find someone to take care of your problem.
Like the policeman.
The fake policeman. Another twist. By going to that and going to their parents and trying to reach out to the whole community. They went up to like basically every level of authority that they could, and then it comes back into their hands. So the fact that their parents were so uninvolved caused his growth and his change.
Yes, absolutely. So and going back to Billy a little bit, I loved, because I said that he always scared me because of his makeup, and he was just very scary looking. But the interesting thing about Billy was the makeup was done by famous makeup artist Tony Gardner.
Okay.
And he's well known for creating all these scary creature masks for like Dead Evil or Evil Dead or whatever, for all these horror movies. And he also did Hocus Pocus, and he also talked about the animatronics for Binks in this movie. Now, I'm not sure if Binks was completely animatronic.
We know he was at least a little bit.
At least a little bit. But they showed that there's an interview about the aspects of how they use Binks in the movie, just like the whole facial expressions and movement of the cat's body. It's pretty interesting. I'll tweet out a link for that.
Guys, I will tweet out a link. That sounds interesting. I mean, we know I think his makeup was done really well. I
loved how they were all different for each witch.
Oh, yes.
You know, to the production design, everything is very specific, whether it's the color or how it's, again, we talked about the symbolism of each thing. For example, right, school's kind of scary initially, and then later on,
it's a prison for children.
That's it. It's a prison for children. And so from then moving forward to that, that's how they painted it. It's very dark and things like that. And obviously that's how they capture the witches in the furnace, because it's like almost a prison. And so everything kind of embodies, this idea of what it is supposed to be, Yeah,
and I mean, I think a lot of the vibe that they set, the atmosphere that they set around the school, was a lot on how they set up their cameras, on their lighting, on the sound that accompanied those scenes, especially in the center of the film, not as much in the beginning. But you get like that angle that it looks like you're about to look at a haunted mansion when they're painting it as prison. It's that low angle up with the guarded fence against the black night. We go inside, the lighting, we get like green lighting, gray lighting. Everything's very spooky. It's from the point of view that you can't really tell where the witches are headed, which aisle they're going down, if they are going to run into Max and Danny, or how they're going to be trapped. But then they add the comedic part where it's like she comes out of the furnace later and they switch up that view because she's coming out like, "Where's my book?" which is an actual question, which coincides with had been playing on the recorder in different languages, and then she like says it in, I think,
in French.
And it's so great because they took something that was scary and they used that prop in the beginning to be scary, and then flip it around and it's comedy.
Make it funny. And then also, even going back to daylight savings time, when they realized that the witches will die at sunset, and so they tried to trick them by using car lights and the harsh purple lighting. We as an audience know that's not what a real sunrise looks like, but that even the harsh lighting was still used in a comedic way when they're like melting and crashing on the floor.
We're dying. No. Phil, I feel like earlier you had some things to say about lighting. Do you want to interject now?
Well, in terms of the lighting, Marisa brings up a good point with specifically orange, right? It's funny because red is used heavily, but it's used menacingly. Whereas orange with sunrise is menacing to the witches, but it's good for the good guys, right? Because it's supposed to symbolize that, hey, you know what, this is almost over. And so, we kind of get hints of it throughout, kind of breaking. The one thing I will say, anytime you shoot a movie at night, it's very difficult to keep continuity in that respect of what time of night or day it is. And so that my only issue with the movie is that sometimes you can tell, sometimes there's inconsistencies in the lighting of when it's actually supposed to be. That's my only issue with the movie, but I can forgive it.
I mean, I think that, like, you can go through this movie and be pretty nitpicky. I know there's a lot of people out there who have looked up the specific year and if there should have been a full moon on that Halloween.
Right.
And, I mean, that's valid, but I think that this is a fantasy movie and you have to lend yourself to believe. And so it's like my one thing that I'm nitpicky about in this film is the fact that they open the book in the room and it sends up this giant pillar of golden light, and for me, I never understood why they didn't realize that this light was being emitted from the book. Phil has told me earlier it's because only magic people can see this light. I'm trying to accept that so it will let me believe in it more. That was always like the one thing that stood out to me, and I wanted to be like, close the book, I can see the light, I can see this happening, you need to stop.
Nothing good comes from the book. But when we see the two reading the book, from their point of view, it looks like it's just glowing. But had they looked up, they might have seen the pillar. This big beam of light. But just looking at it from a close perspective, it just like had a glowing aura effect to it, which they probably didn't even question. So that may be why.
Thank you guys for trying to settle my one, I guess, pet peeve or whatever of this film. Everything else, all those little things, I can overlook. It doesn't really bother me. I think that you understand. Like, for instance, we were talking about like the lighting and whether the day of night. Like, I understand all that. I understand that it's hard to film in the dark. So, you know what? I just took it from the beginning. It's gonna be nighttime for almost the whole movie. There we go.
Yeah, and another little thing that kind of got me was that there's a line when Max is driving and Winifred's like, pull over, where's your driver's permit? How would she know anything about driver's permits? They didn't have cars back then.
That's true. It's like, also, how would she know to say this is all a bunch of hocus pocus?
Exactly.
If she was supposedly
dead.
Not alive.
So, yeah, there are moments here, but it doesn't bother me. Like, I can forgive it because this movie is just so fun to watch. And those are just little things that it still makes sense. Even from an audience point of view, it still makes sense.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of this comes back to the writing, which I know we've mentioned before. And it was David Kirshner and Mick Garris. And Kirshner's kind of, some of his repertoire is An American Tale, Five Focus West,
Addams Family,
The Flintstones, The Pagemaster, Curious George. All of those are pretty happy, kid-friendly movies. He did do The Bride of Chucky, which I think was a big turn for him. And then you have Garris, who did Masters of Horror and Fear Itself. And I think when those two people came together and were able to influence each other, we did get such a good balance of a little comedy and fun and something that children can watch, but with those little elements of fear. You're still scared of Winifred as a kid. You're still scared of the witches.
Absolutely.
And there's some serious matters. They're draining the life out of little children. It's not an a nice, friendly plot line.
Yeah, and even going towards having them drink the potion and the aura going around them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it looks a little cheesy when you're watching it now, but we still believe it that, like, she's literally sucking the life out of all the children. So that was still fun to watch, too. Anything else about the production aspect? I think the filming and editing, it still kept my attention as an adult, as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was still fully engaged.
Here's where you have to look at the editing, right? Avid was invented in 1987, give or take, right?
Okay.
Now, very, very crude, right? And so in 1993, it still wasn't really used that heavily. It might have been, but a lot of this was cut still on actual film, I believe. I don't know 100%, but it's just around that transition time. And so what's interesting to me, again, we talked about no CGI. Now we're talking about editing and also sound at that point. You know, you don't really have... If people are using them, it's very, very crude, and it's very, you know, people are kind of testing it out, but it's not in the mainstream. And so, you know, a lot of this, when you're cutting it, you have to know what you're doing. Today we have the luxury of, like, trimming a couple of frames here and there and doing this and that, and also same thing with the sound. But you know, from experience cutting on, let's say, a Steenbeck, you have to be very specific. You kind of have to know, you know, it goes back to the saying, you know, measure twice, cut once. You have to really know what you're going to do, because otherwise it would take you forever, you know, putting a frame back and literally putting tape on it to bring it, to add that one frame or whatever it is, and then to make the sound match. So, you know, I give a lot of credit to the sound effects and how they were utilized throughout the whole movie. And, you know, I think overall the editing was done really, really well. But I think it's for that notion that everyone, I think today we're afforded that luxury where we don't really need to fully know what we're going to use, because A, most of the stuff isn't necessarily shot on film. B, you know, because of the leeways of editing, cut it which way, whatever, and it's just so much faster. But you know, I also think we've lost something, because by knowing what exactly you're going after, you're going to achieve it much better, I think.
Because you have to have a more specific vision. You don't have as much freedom or as many tries, and so you have to know exactly what you want.
I agree, and, you know, and that's why I think, you know, by knowing what you want, it does ultimately set you more free, I believe. And I think Robert Rodriguez has stated it, you know, and things like that. And it makes you go faster, but people don't realize it. They like choices, and they think choices, you know, allow them to make a better movie, which is, I would argue, is not the case.
And I think this movie had a nice balance of serious moments when Max and Danny are talking about, like, not liking where they're living at. So serious moments in that, and then funny moments to the sisters just being goofy, and then the over the top moments when in the cemetery or when they're singing on stage. So there was just a nice balance that always flowed. And let's talk about the cemetery.
The cemetery end scene or the first scene in the cemetery? We get a few.
Yeah, well, we could talk about both. Let's talk about the end first. I just like to work backwards. The end first.
Okay, let's start all the way from when she turns to stone.
Because we find out that, you know, the sisters can't be physically on hollow ground, and then once Winnie touches the ground, she starts steaming up and turns into stone.
Oh, and I love it now. They go from bottom up, and she's still holding him clutched in her hands and trying to inhale him.
Yeah.
It's wonderful, and it's great. And I like that they added in that little twist, instead of just having them all go poof in the sunlight, that she is that one who's pushing till the very end and is caught between these two things that are trying to kill her. I mean, she's trying to swim, the sun's going to come up to my root, and she's still trying in the middle to suck the life out of someone.
Exactly. And then her death was way more grander than her sisters. The Sara just poofing, and even the special effects is so simple, just like a quick cut to a frame where everyone they're exploding.
Well, because you know what's interesting about that, right? So her goal is to kind of live forever, right? But you look at a statue, and had she stayed in statue form, she almost would have been, in some sense, immortalized. right? Because statues, symbolic of kind of everlasting. So she kind of achieves that goal in some weird way, but then poof, it's all for none because obviously daylight kills that.
Or as you mentioned earlier, she could have just gone, what was it, Phil? She could have just had any child and then gone after the one she didn't like.
She could have had ice, and they would have saved themselves.
And then made more potion.
Yes.
And then gone.
Yeah.
I guess that could be the other problem with this film, but
she could have prolonged her life a bit more.
Just in order to seek the revenge. And they wouldn't have had the same fate. But you know what? Then we'd still be haunted by the witches, and the world would have ended. Phil, it just can't happen that way. Sometimes good has to conquer all.
It's funny because Winnie's pride ultimately won out, and that's what lost the war for her.
True.
So true. And so let's talk about the first time they're in the cemetery with
the resurrection of Billy.
Resurrection of Billy. I liked how these two scenes were drastically different from each other because the first time they're in the cemetery, it's so dark. It's at night. There's no happiness around them. And it's more creepy because they're flying on the brooms with no light around them. And it just added that more scary spookiness that, they can still be in this area and still try to get you.
Yeah, well, I think that the fact that you can see that difference is good because they do go into the cemetery with different objectives each time. The first time, it is an unknown. Like, they're trying to find this place, but they don't really know what they're getting into. They're still in just this sense of uncertainty. They haven't figured out what they need to do. And then when they go back, it's like they're going back with a goal, with a plan, with allies. They're prepared for, this battle, in a way, to take place. So I think that you can see that visually is good.
Yes, absolutely. Phil, what other scenes really stood out to you?
Oh, are we going to do favorite scenes and favorite lines?
Yeah, you guys start. You guys start, and I'll kind of pick an off-the-wall one.
Okay.
Favorite scenes and
the
favorite
writing,
lines.
So many great lines that were just said so fast here and there that you could easily miss them, but they were so well done by all of them. What are some of your
I'm going to
favorite
bring
ones?
up this, actually, there's an article on BuzzFeed, and it highlights the 21 reasons why Hocus Pocus is the best and most important part of Halloween. And I'm bringing it up because literally they touch on most of my favorite quotes. So I'm just going to, first of all, Sara, because I'm going to admit she's my favorite, so maybe a lot of her lines are my favorite, where she's sitting in the noose and she's just like, this is terribly uncomfortable. And then to the part where she's then screams out when they're trying to keep the townspeople at bay, and they're all like, "Oh, we're Spencer ladies," and then of course she's yelling and "Who are sucking the lives out of little children?" To when she's prancing around like saying "amuck," to when she reaches for her lucky rat tail. All of those lines I love. We did mention Winifred's line of when Billy tells her to go to hell, and she replies, "Oh, I've been there, thank you. I found it quite lovely." So I would say that those are probably some of my favorite. I really do like Amok when she goes and she chants around, Amok, come on. Because
I think that the great thing about when Sarah's saying Amok is that the moment immediately right after, when he just hits her hard in the stomach, and then her face, she just literally can't speak anymore, which is all the more funny. Some of my favorite lines was actually when they're just realizing the new world that they're in, and like I said before, the Black River, that was funny. And then the chocolate covered fingered of a man named Clark. The Clark's bar, which I love chocolate, if anyone knows me. I think that was just so funny. You would never think that,
because we're so in a way immune to what technology and society has. You don't understand what the literal interpretation for someone outside would interpret. And they did hit the nail on the head. They really looked at it from outside, and everything became fanciful. And the other characters embarked on it and caught on to their lack of knowledge with as I mentioned, the burning ray of death. I love the burning ray of death. And how she's look, he sparks fire in his hand or something. Just so out of touch with the time that they've entered back into. Favorite scenes?
I would definitely have to say, because I'm a big musical fan, singing Bette Midler, I Put a Spell on You. That was just, it's so fun to watch as a standalone scene every single time. It's still entertaining.
And it has you, and you're enthralled in her performance and all of them singing, but you're also at the same time being like, everyone stop listening. Listen to your children. Listen to the people.
Like, you want to listen to it, but you can't. You shouldn't listen to it.
Exactly.
That's what makes it all the more better.
I would say I really love the reveal of how they revealed the witches entering back into this time. The black flame candle and everything, and the floor rattling and them all ducking really does, it gets you a little scared. And then you just hear the cackle. You hear the cackle, and then it switched frame into the door being busted open and all three of them being there. And they've just entered straight back in, and it's so big and loud, and here's what you're gonna get for the rest of the movie.
Like no time has passed.
Exactly. And just that their characters are brought so alive so quickly, and it's right back in, just like they say. It's like right back into their normal plots and planning and desires. I love it.
Yes, so great. Phil, did you think of any favorite scenes or so?
I like, in terms of lines, I like, Old Hallows Eve has become a night of frolic, because I like, it's a nice reminder of what Halloween was supposed to be like, and we've just kind of made it about candy and things like that. But I will say, for me, my favorite scene has always been the opening, because without that scene, it sets the tone for the rest of it. Obviously, it illustrates, who the witches are, and sets up, what we're kind of in store. And so if that wasn't done in the best way, I don't think the rest could have worked as well as it did.
Your favorite's not ice? I'm surprised.
This is ice.
That's what I was expecting. I was expecting Sal to say. You know what I find interesting? That none of us have brought up the end when Thackeray kind of gets brought back to us in human form and goes to find Emily. Just because you would think that's such a pivotal moment. But as we're talking about it, we've been talking about it for probably about an hour now, and we haven't mentioned that. And I find that interesting because it is something that I almost forget happens until right after I watch it. Do you guys have any feelings about that scene? Like, do you find it necessary? Do you feel like you get resolution from it?
Absolutely, because Binks's punishment was to live forever with guilt, and so long as we know that the witches could still be around, he was still cursed with that. And now that we know they're finally destroyed and gone, that he's finally free. He's free of guilt. He's helped Max help his sister, and he helped himself get back to his sister. So there was resolution to that, and everyone got a happy ending.
See, I guess part of me just really wanted him to stay as a cat so he could live with Danny or something, because I don't know. I just wanted him to stay part of their world. I guess it's like better for him. I guess that's what he wanted.
Well, if you're a cat for 300 years, I would probably want to turn back into human form.
Get over that stage of your life.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. I don't know. I just always forget it, and I think it's very telling when there's certain scenes that you remember and want to talk about, and certain scenes that, you know, kind of pass over your head.
Yeah, and also at the end they had the quick scenes where all the adults finally come out of the building and their curse is broken too. So it just goes to show really how powerful these sisters are, even though they're so unseemingly goofy and you wouldn't think that, but they have power over children, they have power over adults. And once they're finally gone, everyone is free. They're under no control.
The funny part is, you have that whole kind of, you speak to the adults leaving, but then you have Ice and them kind of saying, row, row, row your boat, still stuck. And so they
haven't grown up, so they're still stuck.
There you go.
True. So, great movie for still 20 years and going strong. It's built quite the legacy, quite the following. And even to the point where...
Are we wrapping up?
Even to the point where they had recently, this past weekend, on October 23rd, 2013, they had a reunion screening.
Was it on the 23rd? I thought it was on the 19th. I could be confused. I think it was the Club D23, which is Disney's one of their fan clubs. They met on the
official
19th.
Disney fan club. Yeah,
there
D23. They held a screening, and a bunch of the actors were there. They were present. So we have a few pictures. If
and
you're
memorabilia.
Yes, if you're listening on iTunes, I definitely highly suggest you go over to YouTube and check out the video to check out these photos as well. And we just have pictures of the screening. There's the manual, the book, and then also the panel that was there. Kathy and Jimmy, Allison, the girl who played Allison, and also
Girl played Danny.
Danny was there, Thora Birch. We had the director, and we had the music. And then, of course, Kathy and Jimmy and her outfit.
She looks great. She looks great, by the way.
So great. And then we have the man who played Billy. And I'm sorry, I'm like blanking on these names right now. But and then
That's
also
Allison.
That would be Allison.
Yeah, Allison and Vanessa Shaw who plays Allison. And then we also have Omni who plays Max. He was there.
Interesting. I mean, I think that Omni did a great job, and I'm very happy with his.
Omri. Sorry.
With his Max interpretation. But supposedly, the role of Max was originally either offered or considered by Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, I can see that. If you think about it too, Omri at that time, he had quite the television career. He was on Dallas for like the whole running, and so he's already had experience in a built career as an actor, and he was really young in this movie. So thinking Leonardo DiCaprio in this movie just would bring a whole different element.
I could picture Leo more as a Thackeray than a Max. Not that I don't like who Thackeray was. I do like him, and I still watch him every now and then on NCIS. But I
feel Thackeray and Max are definitely interchangeable. And then I believe we have a couple more pictures. And then Thora Birch in witch hat, and then and then Thora Birch and Kathy and Jimmy. They're still all together. And then they at the screening. There was rumors that they're thinking of making a sequel to Hocus Pocus.
There have been rumors. This rumor is, I mean, highly confrontational. I don't know how you want to say it. It was rumored at this party, and it's also been rumored at the past that they've pitched to Disney a Hocus Pocus 2. What this Hocus Pocus 2 is about is a whole nother source of confrontation. Some people say that because the witches died, it has to be a whole new cast, whole new people. One of the supposed titles was Hocus Pocus 2, The Elder Witch. So that sounds like it's way more focused on a singular being or singular entity than a thing of sisters. But still probably along the same lines. Resurrection, coming back to wreak havoc. And I'm guessing maybe some similar deadlines, whether it be the sun or 24 hours or the stroke of midnight. Who knows? That always creates tension to have a limited space. But some people have flat out denied it. Some people have said that it's not happening and there's no room since the Hocus Pocus was a definite finish.
Yeah, I'd like to think that it's still in the works because as much as I love this movie, I would love to see a second one. Even though if that means bringing everyone back and them creating a whole new outrageous story of how they return from the dead, I would still watch that.
I think that I would watch it. If in my mind, as I imagine this, I know I would just continue to watch Hocus Pocus, the original, over and over again. I'm not sure if I could watch a Hocus Pocus 2 over and over again. I would rather see them make this musical version that they've talked about. I know I mentioned that they wanted to get Bette Midler to maybe produce it, but even people have signed on to help plan it, like Marissa Perry from Hairspray, Marla Mandel from Cinderella, Sarah Bolt from Sister Act. All of them have said more or less that they'd be willing to be in this production. So just to see it on a different atmosphere, maybe add a few more songs, if they could get some of the original people to at least put input, I would really like to see that.
That'd be cool because having a theater production would also create more longevity too, because Hocus Pocus, they're going to rerun this movie from years and years. So and then now having it in print on stage, that's another years added to this franchise. So that would also be fun to see, and I love theater as well. So anything else from Phil? Would you like to see that?
If there was
Hocus Pocus 2 or musical? Come on, I want opinion.
I would do both, but I would do the sequel. I would do kind of new themes. You know, I wouldn't do like, hey, them coming back. I just do something magic related with witches, you know, sisters and things like that. Because if you make it, it's as if you tried to make Hangover 1 and Hangover 2. If you hit the same beats of Hocus Pocus, it's just gonna not be good. Whereas if you just make it stand alone on its own and be funny and just be something different and call it Hocus Pocus 2, then it could work.
But you need some relatable thing to give it to that Hocus Pocus.
And that's magic, and you can, it's all just tied in with, it's all just a bunch of Hocus Pocus.
I mean, I think that if you're going to make a complete standalone movie that doesn't have any of the sisters or any of the main characters, then it should just be a totally different movie. It should just be called The Elder Witch, not Hocus Pocus and The Elder Witch. If they relate it to maybe Danny's kids or Salem or the school or the house or something along those lines, or like someone like bringing back the magic out of at least their house, then I would say Hocus Pocus 2. But
I can see that you have the book, you have all these different things.
Or the book, or so even the book, yeah.
You know, I mean, the book is the all-powerful thing that could, do something.
Do stories from the book. That would be fun. Overall, this movie is so legendary, and it's fun to watch every single time. Is there anything, anywhere people can follow you?
No. Here.
No social medias?
I don't believe in, I mean, I do believe it. I know it exists. I just don't really lend my time to social media as much.
And Phil, where can we follow you?
You can follow me at Movie Anatomy. How about that?
Yes.
And Phil's followable.
And we're also going to do something really special for our Oscar month, which is February. We're going to kind of align our movie anatomies after Turner Classic Movies and the Oscar winners. So that's going to be a fun month to look forward to.
Wonderful.
But before that, we still got a few more Halloween movies. We've got Thanksgiving, and we've got, of course, the holidays.
Of course. We can't forget that. So we're starting off the Halloween holidays, and then we're going to get into Thanksgiving with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And we should see what other movies in the future. You should let us know. And we love movies, obviously, and we love talking about them. So please follow us at Movie Anatomy on Twitter and check out our amazing website where we're really coming along. It's looking fabulous, and I thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see you next movie.
There we go.
Producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.